Industrial zones are the powerhouse of cities. This series, Deconstructing Industrial, is brought to you by Frankie, Industrious Property Software. Over the next few weeks, you'll hear from some of the best in the business as we break down industrial sites to their core components. I'm Georgie Fennick, your host. Today's discussion, flooring and yard foundations. We're joined by Custom Crete's Andrew Potter. Concrete dates back to the ancients and is still one of the most commonly used building products today. Before we dive into the conversation with Andrew, a few things to know. Concrete shrinks as the water content dries out, and over an annual period you should look out for cracks and potholes because repairing these early to get ahead of any major cracking can save you a lot of time and money in the long term. Plan your yard and warehousing space for the vehicle traffic that you expect. So Andrew will take us through this, but troublesome areas are usually turning circles for forklifts and trucks. And an annual sweep or washdown is always a good idea and should be added to the maintenance schedule. I'm joined today by Andrew Potter from Custom Crete to talk about yards and prefab walling. How did you get into the industry, Andrew?
I started my apprenticeship as a block layer in the Waikato for a company down there. I finished my time laying blocks and bricks, and we, as a small town New Zealand, we actually had to do everything in and around the concrete industry. So I learned how to pour floors and lay cobblestones and tiling, and when I moved to Auckland I found a company needed a helping hand doing floors and foundations, and I sort of moved into the Auckland.
So yards are busy places and need to be incredibly durable. How do you assess what type of products to use on warehousing and distribution sites?
Good question. We tend to head towards the concrete side of things. It's probably your most durable surface. There's obviously a cost comparison with asphalt and hot mix, but if your yard is handling forklifts, heavy trucks, containers, you really do want to be thinking concrete for long term.
And by long term, what do you mean?
Well, a well-prepared concrete driveway might last you, say, 20 years, whereas a very well-prepared hot mix under the same service conditions might only last 3 or 4. So
fascinating. And what sort of price differential in NZD are you talking between the hot mix and the hard concrete?
It's not as much as you'd first think. It's always been the understanding for most people that hot mix is significantly cheaper than concrete, but the fact is the prep work is the same or similar. The actual product itself, by the time we're down, it's only around $30 a square metre difference between the two. But when you're looking at a service life of 3 to 5 times, you get that money back very, very quickly.
Cool. So what should be done annually to look after the yard and flooring?
Don't use it. But I know that doesn't work for tenants or landlords. So keep them clean. I guess if on the yards, try not to roll. If you've got loose metal or products, don't go punching them into the surface with forklifts and heavy containers and that sort of thing. Use dunnage for landing heavy containers. Just the sort of stuff that you'd typically do if it was your own driveway at home. Keep them tidy.
So does that mean sort of some commercial sweeping and some washdowns?
Yeah, it certainly helps to keep that stuff off. If you lay out your yard in such a way that the forklifts don't have to do too much tight turning, it's the tight turning with heavy loads that really screw up the pavements and wear the areas quite badly. So if you've got an area that's constantly, you've got a wear path with forklifts doing heavy turning in one spot, try and avoid that, or think of ways to move that around.
So diving into the difference between asphalt and concrete, do you want to take us through a recent project where you've kind of seen the two play out and probably the lifetime economics between the two?
I struggle to sort of see really any use for asphalt. I've got to put my concrete places hat on there. But you have to look at the area that you're putting it and what the application is going to be on top of it. If you're going to be using forklifts and going in and out and turning around and a lot of movements, it really does get worn pretty hard. It packs up. You've only got a 20 or 30 mil layer of hot mix there that moves under the forklift's weight. If you've got a straight line roadway, for example, that's probably the best use of the product. If you're haven't got machines and trucks and screwing tightly around on it, that's where you will see some cost benefit. But in my opinion, there's just not a big enough difference between the two to make it a viable solution in any shape or form.
Where have you seen that play out recently?
We just did a project down in Hunua Road, quite a large industrial complex that had a roadway built right around the outside that we've just ripped up and replaced in concrete because although the idea of the roadway going around the building worked quite well, it didn't really have trucks or machines screwing up on it. The feeds out of each shed with the forklifts coming in and out were really tearing up, and as soon as that tearing up happened outside the factories themselves, the sheds in the loading areas themselves, it started to deteriorate into the roadways, and as soon as you start to get water under it, it really does start to pack up. So as soon as you get a hole in hot mix or tar seal, you really need to either get it patched or do something with it, because that hole has been caused by a reason or by something, and it'll just get worse and deteriorate a lot faster.
And so when you're patching that type of area in a sort of a busy yard, do you take out a big block, or do you kind of fill in the holes as you go?
It really depends on the owner.
Yeah.
You'd take a look at the area and then there's the areas around it. If you can do just a little patch, you will, but generally speaking, patching just leads to another patch and another patch, unfortunately.
That is very interesting. Is there any kind of products that have come out recently where you can put protective coatings on floors to ensure sort of that the lifetime lasts a bit longer?
Yeah, there are. There's actually quite a bit of technology and improvements and things on surface hardeners, epoxy coatings, that sort of thing. They are similarly, they are still affected by the use on top of them. It doesn't really matter how hard you get the surface. If it's getting pummeled, it'll still get chewed away. But they do very much harden the surface and make them nice and durable for the lighter users, the likes of just driving forklifts around and racking and things like that. They're great because it actually allows the forklift tyres to sort of almost slide a little bit, which takes a little bit of load off the surfaces. So some great products out there for hardening and restoration as well. Some of the floors.
Cool. And final question for you, Andrew. What are the latest developments in concrete products and technology?
There's a lot more than people think. A couple of the big sort of fields of technological movement is fibre, so reinforcing fibre that we pour in the concrete, and another one, well there's another couple actually, self-compacting concrete, which self-vibrates itself. That's another really cool product for the use in columns and beams and stuff in commercial buildings. And then another product that's out there in the market that's really quite interesting for the likes of big commercial type paving and patio or paving, carports, driveways, that sort of thing, is no fines concrete or permeable concrete.
Does it mean that it's breathable?
It absorbs water, so because we've got big site coverages and things like that, a lot of commercial properties are starting to have to go down the lines of retention tanks and holding their roof runoff water before they go into the public system. So permeable concrete, you can use your driveways and the hard fill underneath it as water storage for that. So you don't need tanks so much. You can run the water into the concrete, which will then disperse either into the ground, or we can retain it in voids under the concrete for retention into the public system.
Fantastic.
So that's some really cool product that's out in the market at the moment that's developing along. Yeah, that's really interesting product.
I've seen it done in roads, but I didn't realise that it was also for driveways and for yards and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, we've just poured a yard with it that's actually going to be handling concrete block pallets. So we'd like to see how that performs over time. It's going to be in a pretty tough environment, dealing with heavy forklifts moving heavy pallets of blocks day in, day out. So we should have a pretty good idea in the next 12 months as to what the serviceability on that platform's like. And if it performs like we're all hoping it does, it should be quite an interesting product for yards in the next 12 to however long. To try and avoid some of these tanks. The tanks take up a lot of room on sites. If we can avoid that and poke it into the ground, that'd be great.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of the audience, the reason why you want to do that is that obviously with the surface area of industrial sites, you collect a lot of rainwater over the size of the site, and that goes into can overflow the storm drainage systems of a city.
Yeah, that's
quite quickly.
Yeah, so you're seeing around the newer commercial subdivisions big ponding and retention tanks and things like reservoir type things before they run into the civil drainage system. So anything that you can do to retain water on site for a period of time is great.
Yeah, and then potentially look to use it for potentially sort of the exteriors wash of the building and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess the way the permeable concrete works, that wouldn't work with that product, but yes, you can do that
with the drainage tanks. Yeah. And the reinforcing fibre, that sounds fascinating. Is that fiberglass, or what do you mean by reinforcing fibre?
There's lots of different fibres. There's steel fibre, which a lot of people will know about. It's been around for quite a while. But there's a lot of different fibres coming into the market. Some doing different jobs. Polyester fibres were used for concrete curing. They absorb quite a bit of water and they release that through the curing phase, so you don't have so much problem with cracking. There's Dyneema fibres that are really great for strength and shear capacities in concrete, but they don't rust like the steel ones do, so they're great for external usage where they might get wet. Steel fibres have a tendency to go, you can see them after the concrete's finished and they will go a little bit rusty every now and then, but so that's where the Dyneema fibres work really well. So fibre has come a long way in the last few years and it's got a long way to go.
Fantastic. And in the this is sort of a bit of a follow-on question. But in terms of the concrete manufacturing process, it uses a lot of energy and it releases a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. Have you heard of any kind of developments in that space?
Green concrete?
Yes?
Yeah, there are.
Is there such a thing?
Well, yes and no. There are products called green concrete that they use a lot of recycled content for. So, crushing old or recycled concrete, waste concrete, and using that aggregate back in the mixes. All of the plants are recycling a lot of water from their wash water and things at the moment because we just need to. So yes, there is a green concrete.
While their lifetime may be long, care and attention should be taken to look after and maintain the yard and flooring. In short, concrete looks after you if you look after it. Annual flooring sweeps and inspections should be added to your maintenance schedule. We'd like to thank Andrew Potter from Custom Crete. This series is Deconstructing Industrial, a series that breaks down building components so that you know what to do to look after them.